The Final Fantasy series has been around for what would scientifically be referred to as a hot minute. And in that hot minute, the series has become one of the most popular JRPG franchises of all time and amassed millions of fans all over the world. And recently, Square Enix, the company behind the Final Fantasy franchise and owner of My Credit Card and Soul, has been churning out Final Fantasy games like crazy. With Final Fantasy 16 around the corner, on top of the success of the Crisis Core Remaster and the Final Fantasy 7 Remake, and the release of Stranger of Paradise, which admittedly, I completely forgot about until this very moment, LOL, we have finally entered a much-needed Final Fantasy resurgence. With new games on the horizon, my fellow Final Fantasy fans are going bonkers right now, and if you're watching this video, I bet you want to go bonkers too and get in on all this Final Fantasy goodness. Luckily for you, I'm here to bestow upon you my expert advice and kinda try to help you make a little bit of a dent in the series before the new games drop. Very quick side note, there are tons of Final Fantasy games, like so many. So to keep things easy breezy, we're just gonna talk about the main titles and their sequels, so no spin-offs and no mobile games. Please don't ask me about the mobile games, man. I don't know what's going on with those.
Yeah.
As I talk about the games, they will be in order, but I'm also going to break them up into eras just to keep things a little interesting, and then at the end I'll tell you which games from which era I think will be a pretty solid starting point for the newer folks, alright? Splendid, wonderful, let's go. Getting started with the first tier, we have the Ancestors. And when these games came out, they were released for systems like the Famicom and the NES. And you know, I understand that back then they were just doing the best that they could with the resources that they had, but these games looked hella crunchy. Thankfully, Final Fantasy 1 through 6 have been remastered as the Pixel Editions and are available to buy on Steam and console. And these games aren't graphically demanding in the slightest. If you wanted to, you could probably run these on a leapfrog. This is the OG, the game that saved Squaresoft from certain doom and allowed Final Fantasy to become the iconic series that it is today. And even though it can't really keep up with the new kids anymore, we gotta give it its flowers, you know? Thank you, Final Fantasy. I love you, baby. Mwah! The biggest thing that Final Fantasy 1 brings to the table is the ability to customize your whole party at the start. You can rock through the game with a more balanced group, or run it with 4 white mages if you hate yourself. Why have so many of you willingly done this? This is terrifying. You do have to remember that this game is a product of its time, and like many JRPGs of the 80s, it's a little bit difficult and vague, and it doesn't hold your hand at all. All this game is going to do is give you hints, and it's going to give you those hints once, and if you miss out on those hints, well, you, bucko, and good luck finding that random cave on the other side of the map that was briefly mentioned in a single conversation with this random NPC outside the frickin' weapons store. So make sure you're paying close attention, or just look up a guide. I'm not going to tell anyone you use the guide, that'll be our little secret. Final Fantasy 1 really is about as simple as it gets for a JRPG released in the 1980s. Everything about it just screams old school with its simple turn-based battle system and pretty bare-bones fantasy story. Honestly, by today's standards, this game isn't anything fancy, and it's definitely not as spiffy as the newer entries, but considering that this is the great granddaddy of the series, we're just gonna cut it some slack and let it slide. And on to Final Fantasy II, which is the series' introduction to the games having more of a deeper and involved story with characters that actually talk and aren't emotionless cardboard cutouts. Yay! As far as story goes, it's pretty good in comparison to the more simple story in Final Fantasy I, but I can't say it's gonna blow your mind or anything. It's another pretty standard fantasy story. However, this is one of the more hated games in the series, and honestly, for a good reason. Square really tried to jazz things up by adding this really weird leveling system that makes sense when you think about it, but not actually when you do it. The traditional leveling system of stats increasing as you gain levels was replaced by a system that increases individual stats as you execute moves in battle that correspond to their respective stats. It really is a lot to get into, and it's a little bit more complicated than what I have to say about it. And I mean, you know, trying something new wasn't the problem, it's just that the execution wasn't great. It was just bad, actually. There are a handful of reasons as to why Final Fantasy II is on a lot of fans' shit list, but the leveling system is the main reason as to why so many people are put off from this game. Wacky leveling system aside, we did get chocobos out of it, so I'm not gonna complain too much. Final Fantasy III is pretty par for the course for the series so far. Similar to 1 and 2, 3 doesn't have a Game of the Year quality story going on, and the characters aren't fleshed out, like you really are just playing the same dude 4 times. But it does continue in Final Fantasy II's footsteps with the characters talking amongst themselves and NPCs. But what really sets this one apart from the other two is the introduction of classes. This game is most noted for introducing the job class system, which allows you to switch between jobs whenever you want. And this system was pretty dang influential. It's been seen in like loads of other games in this series, and it gets better and better with every iteration. This game doesn't have a ton of glitz and glam, but it's still a fun little jaunt. Fair warning though, this is one of the harder games in the series, and it is very grindy, like Dragon Quest VIII grindy. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating, but it's gonna steal your lunch money and kick your ass from here to the far plane. So Godspeed to you brave souls who attempt to take on this game. With the release of Final Fantasy IV, it started to feel like Square really figured out what they wanted the series to be moving forward. There was a huge jump in quality with everything in this game, but especially with the narrative. Like, the writers are reaching Mercedes-lackey levels of storytelling with this game. The story is filled with so many plot twists that even the plot twists have plot twists, and characters go through major internal and external conflict, and super good character development for a game that came out in, what, I don't know, 1990 or something? This entry marks the series' introduction of the ATB gauge, which adds a little bit of spice to the traditional turn-based battle system combat and requires you to be a bit quick on your feet. And this game is just straight up gorgeous too. The detailing on the sprites and magic effects is great, and all the various locations are just really good looking. And you know, call me crazy, but Final Fantasy IV just feels like it's kind of the first official Final Fantasy game. I just feel like it really embodies what the first three games were going for, while adding some new stuff, and it really pulls it off perfectly. This game actually has a somewhat lesser known sequel titled Final Fantasy IV The After Years, which was not included with the Pixel remaster. I don't know why, because it's a sequel to 4 and it's a pretty good game, so I don't know why they didn't do it, but whatever. It's an episodic game that follows the original cast and a few new characters, and there is a 3D remake of this game on Steam, but to be totally honest, if you really want to play this game, then you should 100% play the PSP version if you can get your hands on it. It's just better in literally every way. But as far as sequels go, this is entirely optional. You won't be missing out on anything too crazy if you just decide to play Final Fantasy IV and move on to the next game, but I do still recommend it. I think it's pretty fun. Final Fantasy V is definitely the most underrated game of the series, no contest. This game is super self-aware of how lighthearted and goofy it is, and it's not taking itself seriously at all, and more people should totally consider giving this entry a try. It still has all the elements of the previous games, but pushes a little bit of the gloom and doom to the side. It makes for a fun, upbeat adventure. This game takes Final Fantasy III's job system and really improves upon it. There's a total of 26 jobs now, and you can mix and match them for some awesome job combos. Every job has abilities that can be combined with other jobs to pretty much create your own custom job. It can get a little overwhelming, but it's kind of worth playing around with to see what works for you. Sadly, this game is criminally slept on, and I'm sure that has to do with it not only taking so long to have a Western release, but also being sandwiched between two of the most popular games in the series. This poor guy really just didn't stand a chance. But it's a good thing I'm telling you about it now, isn't it? So while you're watching the rest of this video, you can just head on over to Steam and download it. You've got no reason to not play it now, man. I mean, come on. The main villain is a tree that has a whole fight sequence with a talking turtle. Are you telling me you don't want to see that? Seriously? Final Fantasy VI is said by veteran fans to be the best game in the series, and I don't think that's true, but it's really freaking good. You know the gloom and doom that I said Final Fantasy V avoided? It's all here. It's all in Final Fantasy VI. They did a complete 180 and made this game sad from beginning to end, but it is still 100% worth playing. Even though this story is a huge downer and a real tearjerker, and it touches on a lot of intense topics with a great cast of characters who just can't catch a freaking break, and by the time you finish, you're gonna walk away way more depressed than when you started. But that's all a part of the Final Fantasy VI experience, baby. Hell yeah. This game is impressive in a lot of areas. This is definitely the most fleshed out cast that we've seen so far, with all of them having really deep and emotional stories, like heavy on the emotional. The battle system is really fun and easy. It's still turn-based, but there's a lot of emphasis on using each character's specialized skills and weapons in battle, as well as using things like espers and magitech armor. There's a lot of variety between characters, and no two characters play the same. The story really is what the game is mostly known for. It's a semi-tragic, high-stakes adventure with quite possibly the most bonkers villain in the entire series. And yeah, it's pretty much exclusively filled with like sadness and Danganronpa levels of despair. So if you're trying to laugh or get a little chuckle going, you're gonna have to go somewhere else, because you ain't gonna find it here, pal, trust me. Everyone's first Final Fantasy game was either 7, 8, or 10, and anyone who says they started with a different title is a liar. Okay, well, they're probably not lying, but the classics tier is where a lot of current Final Fantasy fans started, and it's probably gonna be where you start too, let's just be honest. I know you have your eye on Final Fantasy VII, you want to see what all the hype is about. Don't lie to me, man, I can see it in your eyes, come on. The release of the PS1 and the PS2 meant that Square had some snazzy new tech to play around with, which would allow for them to try some new things with the game's graphics and battle systems. From this point forward, diversity is the name of the game, with every title trying something that's a little bit different from the games that were released before it. So let's get this started with Final Fantasy VII, aka Square's favorite child. I mean, seriously, look at all the freaking content this game has. Oh wow, it's actually way more than I thought. Square didn't pull any punches for this entry. They decided to jazz up the game's visuals by using these goofy-ass 3D models instead of sprites. Following Final Fantasy VI, they continued to move away from the fantasy setting and dived into a more modern setting where they could really show off those new beefed-up visuals. They've delivered a super solid story that isn't the best thing I've ever sat through, but it's had people in a chokehold for 25 years, so that's gotta count for something. And the characters in this game were so dang good that they're still referenced in media to this day. Square revamped everything to show off what they could do with the PS1's new hardware, and it really paid off. Final Fantasy VII took over the world when it came out, and it's without a doubt the most popular game in the series. Seriously, it's not even close. You saw those spin-offs. They're not doing that for any of the other games now, are they? At this point, the only thing that could outhype Final Fantasy VII and anything related to it would be like a Half-Life 3 announcement, and we all know that's not gonna happen. This game made Final Fantasy what it is today, undoubtedly, no two ways about it. Argue with your mama. From the weapons, the characters, the music, to the flawless materia-based battle system, it's all iconic and instantly recognizable to literally anyone with eyes. And here's a fun little fact for you. Final Fantasy VII is actually the second best-selling game on the PS2. Pretty impressive. It was narrowly beaten by some game called Gran Turismo. Like, I don't know who that is, but good for her. Since we're already here, we might as well talk about Final Fantasy VII Remake really quick. Come here, listen to what I have to say. Don't even look at this game until you've played Crisis Core or at least watched the cutscenes or a video essay about the game. I'm not going to tell you why, I'm just going to say you'd be much better off if you did. And I'd also recommend you play the OG Final Fantasy VII before the remake, not only because it's a great game, but also for other reasons. Look, just trust me, okay? I'm the professional. You gotta trust me, alright? Just trust me on this one. This guy is the first official love it or hate it entry. Square was back in their experimental era again, and boy oh boy, it definitely shows. That experimentalism led to this being a fan-dividing entry in 1998, and it's still dividing fans now. Hooray for consistency! Final Fantasy VIII is certainly a game, and I don't want to say that it's bad, it's just different, and not exactly in a positive way. Like I said, opinions are pretty 50-50 for this game, but I'm not gonna lie, Final Fantasy VIII is kind of a snooze fest, because every aspect of this game is either slow, inconvenient, or a hellish mix of both. Conversations move at a snail's pace, animations both in and out of battle feel sluggish, the mandatory drawing and stalking of magic in practically every battle in this game is one of the worst magic-attaining systems I have ever seen in a JRPG, and don't even get me started on junctioning. Now that is an atrocity. And the story is just... the game definitely has one. It is there, but my god, it's confusing. Like, I still don't know what time compression means, and I don't know if I want to know at this point. Despite my and many other people's personal gripes with a lot of things in this game, Final Fantasy VIII is still a very popular entry, so maybe there's just something wrong with me. Maybe I just can't see the vision. Final Fantasy IX nails that medieval aesthetic that the older games are going for, but now fully realized in 3D. A lot of people think that the character design in this game is horrible, and they're right, it definitely is, but it's also kind of charming in a weird way, and that charm is reflected in the story too. There's an intentional lack of realism in this game compared to others. Its story and overall design is very cartoony and whimsical, but don't let those goofy looking character models fool you, okay? This game buckles down pretty hard during its more serious moments, and there's a lot of them. Like, I stayed crying throughout this game, man. For the battle system, Square went back to a Final Fantasy VII type system and totally abandoned whatever the hell they were trying to do in Final Fantasy VIII, and thank God for it. Unfortunately, the UI was sacrificed in the process, so now we have to look at this monstrosity for 35 hours. This is so ugly. Final Fantasy X is to the PS2 what Final Fantasy VII was to the PS1. This is a quintessential JRPG and a lot of folks' gateway drug to the Final Fantasy series. Not even to just the Final Fantasy series, but to JRPGs in general. Final Fantasy X is up there with Final Fantasy VI and VII as being hailed as one of the best games in the series, and honestly, that's a pretty worthy title. The story itself is memorable, pretty easy to follow, and it has all kinds of beautiful and iconic moments such as this. My god, the voice of an angel. And alongside Final Fantasy VII, this is one of the most recognizable casts in the entire franchise. They even have Auron from Kingdom Hearts 2, that is so crazy. Final Fantasy X's battle system is amazing. It's a fantastic starting point for people who have never touched a JRPG or any kind of turn-based battle system. A big perk of this battle system is that the turn order is visible on screen, and that seriously helps out with planning your battle strategy, and you can also switch out party members mid-battle too. This is the first game in the series to have that feature, and it's super helpful. Leveling up characters is handled in the oh-so-recognizable sphere grid, which once again is very user-friendly and adds some nice customization for abilities and spells as you progress through the game. And of course, we kinda gotta talk about the elephant in the room, the voice acting. The VA is really cringy and weird sometimes, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. This is the first dubbed Final Fantasy game after all. They were trying something new. This was Square Enix's first foray into voice acting, and you know, the first time you try doing something, the execution usually isn't the best. Just take a look at my Berseria video. Yikes. Just give it a go, man. I mean, there's no other Final Fantasy game where you can be sucked into a shining prolapse sky anus. Doesn't that sound fun? If you're expecting a deep, semi-serious, thought-provoking game like Final Fantasy X, do not. This game is not that. This game is the definition of a serotonin boost. It's just silly and ridiculous, and its plot and characters play out like a cheesy, self-aware 80s action-adventure flick that knows how corny it is. And that's what makes it so good. Obviously, it's a sequel, so don't start here. And for that reason, I'm not going to talk about it much, but I am going to let you in on a controversial little secret. Come here, come closer, be not afraid. This is my favorite game in the series. This is the best one because it's so goofy and stupid, and I live for that. Go into this with low expectations for a guaranteed good time. It's one of the best games in the series. I don't care what the people on game FAQs have to say. This game rocks. Final Fantasy XI was the first online Final Fantasy game, and I don't have any footage for it. So please enjoy this logo. Teehee. And for its time, it was pretty on and poppin', but the servers are currently rotting in the basement of Square Enix HQ, so unless you have a time machine, you won't really be playing this one. At least not on console. It is still available on PC, and it's got a pretty decent player base going, so if MMOs are your jam, you can just pop on over and give it a look-see. So this next batch of games can really only be described as divisive. A lot of people like these games, but just as many people hate them, trust me. So my advice to all you newbies out there is to just go into these games with an open mind and an open heart and form your own opinions, yeah? Okay, cool, great, let's get it. Final Fantasy XII is... geez, look, I told myself I was gonna keep this fun and lighthearted and not be too negative when it comes to any of the games in the series, but good God, Final Fantasy XII was really pushing it. Alright, let's just get through the basics first. Gotta remain neutral for the people. Neutral, neutral, neutral. Positivity. For some reason, there are 3 versions of Final Fantasy XII, but the Zodiac Age is the only one that you need to worry about. Zodiac Age is basically the better, beefed-up remastered version of the very easy to say, and totally not a mouthful, International Zodiac Job System version of Final Fantasy XII that was region-locked to Japan in like 2007. It keeps pretty much everything from the OG, but the job board is the biggest change, allowing you to assign 2 jobs out of 12 to each character for some pretty powerful combos. And this is a very welcome change because in the original Final Fantasy XII, in order to explore all of the job options, you would have to play through the game twice, and I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. Final Fantasy XII utilizes a real-time battle system, which basically means that battles don't teleport you to a separate screen anymore like in all the previous games. When enemies see you, things get poppin' immediately. Time does not stop, it does not slow down, and every enemy in your immediate vicinity is ready to hit you with a spine buster through the concrete. The battle system is pretty alright. There's a good bit of customization to be had once you start getting into things like gambits, but after a while it just really starts to feel a bit dull, kind of standing around and watching your characters pull off the most soulless character animations known to mankind. Like, sweet lord, where did the animation budget go? And as far as characters and the story are concerned, in the spirit of positivity, I'll just say there's only 2 good characters in this entire game and neither of them are this loser. And if you like long, drawn-out, bland, uninteresting political dramas that air on ABC between the hours of 8 and 10 p.m., then man oh man have I got the game for you. Final Fantasy VIII may have been controversial, but Final Fantasy XIII was on a whole different level. As a series debut on PS3, the hype behind Final Fantasy XIII was huge, and fans thought that this would blow past entries out of the water no problem. And depending on who you ask, that may or may not have happened, but the general consensus surrounding 13 is that it missed the mark in more than a few areas. Starting off with the battle system, Final Fantasy XIII uses what's called the Command Synergy battle system, which sounds way too cool for how it actually works. Unlike past entries, battles aren't very hands-on. There isn't really any strategy behind any of these fights besides setting up paradigms and just mashing X for the duration of every battle. Of course, you can input individual commands yourself, but why would you ever want to do all that thinking when you can just press one button? Cut out the middleman, aka your brain, and just let the game play itself, dude. A big issue that practically had people ready to knock down the doors of Square Enix HQ is that world exploration does not exist. This is a super linear game. And Final Fantasy isn't known for having huge sprawling worlds anyway, but past entries are definitely more open than 13. Like, Final Fantasy 1 checked more open world boxes than 13. It's kinda bonkers if you think about it. There's gonna be people out there that say that the game really opens up about halfway through, but I'm not gonna count one section of the game being a giant empty open field as open world, Barbara. And there are no towns. There is not a single legitimate town here. What kind of JRPG doesn't have any freaking towns? I don't get to go in a building and shop and peruse the vendor's wares. I have to shop from the same place that I saved my game. What kind of backwards ass? And the story is fine, kind of. It's got this super cool futuristic sci-fi vibe to it, but a lot of people's gripes with it is that it's filled to the brim with lore-heavy words that the game just introduces to you as if you already know what they mean. Of course, this isn't a deal breaker, it's just a lot to have thrown at you. Like, Fal'Cie, Lassie, Seath, Primarch, Focus? What are you talking about, buddy? Help me out a little. Final Fantasy XIII is honestly in my top 5 favorite Final Fantasy games of all time. I just love it with everything that I am, but there are just some areas of the game where I really can't defend you, girl. Like, the haters are right, they just are. But despite its flaws and all of the backlash that it receives, I do still think that it's a pretty decent game and is overall worth a try. And because I am a kind and benevolent content creator, I won't be including gameplay for Final Fantasy 13-2 or Lightning Return, because every other second of those games is spoiler city if you haven't played 13. And no, it's not because I completely forgot to record footage for these two games, you goofball. Why would you? I can't believe you would assume that. I'm a professional. Go on, shut up. Anyway, these are both sequels, so play 13 first and then come and play these. You're in for a good time. Kinda, sorta, a little, like if you squint, like one of them's good. Which one? Who knows? I don't know. It'll be a fun little surprise for you when you get to these, won't it? Ooh, mystery. Final Fantasy XIV is an MMO like Final Fantasy XI, but just better in literally every way. Or at least that's what I've heard. Now, I'm not an MMO player myself, so my experience with this game is limited, but the amount of time that I did spend frolicking around the land of Eorzea, I thoroughly enjoyed myself. And with the game having close to 1 million daily players, a lot of other people are enjoying themselves too. It's extremely popular, and people have nothing but good things to say about it. For those of you who want to know all the nitty-gritty about Final Fantasy XIV, here are some YouTubers that can explain elements of the game far better than I ever could. Okay, there you go, check them out, show them some love. And last but not least, Final Fantasy XV, the first Final Fantasy game on the PS4. Being the first game of the series on a new console generation, 15 brought in a ton of new fans when it dropped in 2016. And back then, I probably would have said for you to put this on the back burner for when you've got more solid Final Fantasy experience under your belt, because when this game came out, it was lacking a lot of polish, let's just say that. But with the Royal Edition of Final Fantasy XV, changes have been made to the game to push it over the edge and make it better. Still not perfect, but definitely better. A couple honorable mentions include an updated action-based battle system that allows you now to not only play as Noctis, but as Prompto, Ignis, and Gladio in battle, and you can freely switch between them too. Now, I'm always going to be ride or die for a turn-based battle system, but 15's combat was pretty fun. Being able to do things like air dancing, warp strikes, and switching between weapons, and all four of the bros kept combat feeling fresh throughout the whole game. There are new minigames as well, like Chocobo Racing, which I'm pretty sure has been purposely designed so that you can't actually win. Gladio's AI is cheating, I swear to God. And some quality of life changes sprinkled throughout the Royal Edition steps this fun little bro venture up a notch from the base game. But most importantly, some cutscenes and DLC have been added to fill in some of those pretty big plot holes left behind from base Final Fantasy XV. When this game first came out, I had a huge issue where major things would happen off screen and the characters just wouldn't mention anything about it. You really just had to fill in the blanks yourself and like read other people's theories on Tumblr about what could have possibly happened. And that is still an issue now, kind of, but it's better than it was in the base game. 15 is also sort of open world. I say that very loosely because you can go wherever you want, but there isn't anything to do out here. It's really pretty though, and you can go fishing. Seriously, go fishing, it's really fun. And as for Final Fantasy 15's story, if I had to describe it, I would say as a game, it's okay, but as a Final Fantasy game, it's just meh. Not bad, just meh. Do with that what you will. With the games finally out of the way, let's get to the reason why you're even watching this video in the first place. Which of these games should be your first entry into the Final Fantasy series? Personally, I would recommend Final Fantasy 1, 4, 6, 7, 9, and 10. And no, I swear I did not just pick these because they're some of the most popular games in the series. I picked them because I feel like they're all great representations of what Final Fantasy offered in different eras, while still having the added bonus of just being easy to pick up and play and enjoy. And I know hearing this at the end of a video can be like hella lame, but you really can start wherever you want. There's no wrong way to begin your Final Fantasy journey. Even though I think there are some games that are definitely better for people to start with than others, I still think you're going to have a great time no matter where you choose to jump in. Like, if you want to start with Final Fantasy 15 because you dig the more modern battle system, then go for it. If one of the earlier games is something you want to try because it's giving you those ooey gooey feelings of nostalgia, then hey man, try those too. Overall, you're gonna have a good time no matter what you start with. And there you go, my professional guide to helping you choose your first Final Fantasy game. I really hope this video helped you out with picking a game to start with, and I hope it gave you a laugh or two along the way. And yeah, let me know in the comments which game grabbed your attention if you're new, and if you're a more seasoned gamer, let me know what game introduced you to Final Fantasy. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see if there are people who are like me, who played Kingdom Hearts first and that's how you got into Final Fantasy, because the Kingdom Hearts to Final Fantasy pipeline is very real. And thank you so much for watching and taking time out of your day to listen to my dinky little voice. And don't forget to like and subscribe and turn on the bell. I'm cooking up some new videos that are going to be out much sooner rather than later, so please look forward to those too. And yeah, dude, you got like 40 years of games to catch up on. Go, get out of here. Go, go, go. Well, actually, subscribe first, then go. Get out of here.